I stood at the door, heart pounding, my hand hovering just above the wood. Inside, I could hear them. The voice of my elder sister, Jinika, was sharp, accusing. The man I had once believed to be the love of my life, Obinna, was replying, his tone frustrated, desperate. She should be dead by now. Jinika hissed. Hurry up and finish the job. How long will it take? She'll start suspecting something. I froze, my entire body trembling. My ears, once silent to the word, now picked up every cruel word with terrifying clarity. The surgery had been a success, I could hear again. But the truth I had walked into was not the one I had imagined. I slowly lowered my hand, reminding myself to act as though nothing had changed. If I let on that I could hear them, I would be dead before I even stepped inside. The truth had to stay buried, at least for now. I took a deep breath and knocked. There was a long pause before Obinna opened the door. His smile was forced, his eyes darting nervously behind him. Amara, my love, welcome home, he exclaimed, pulling me into a stiff embrace. His voice was laced with fake enthusiasm, but I could hear the tremor beneath it. I pulled away, glancing at him as if I could sense something was wrong, but I kept my face blank. Obinna, it's good to be home, I said, my voice steady. I've missed you. He led me inside, his hand lingering on my back in a way that made my skin crawl. I could still feel the weight of the words I had overheard pressing down on me. But I couldn't afford to show it. Jinika was standing in the kitchen, her arms crossed. She looked at me with a calculated smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. Amara, welcome back, she said in sign language, her hands moving gracefully. I nodded in response, pretending to read her lips and gestures as I always had. It had been our way of communicating since the accident, but now it felt like a cruel joke. She came over and hugged me tightly, and I could feel the tension in her body. I have a surprise, I said as I pulled away, my voice light. I watched Obinna's eyes widen slightly, fear flashing across his face for just a moment. Jinika's expression remained unchanged, her eyes narrowing slightly. What is it, my dear? Obinna asked, trying to keep his voice even. I hesitated for a heartbeat, the words on the tip of my tongue. I could tell them I could hear. I could tell them I knew. But then what? Would I survive the night? I'm just so tired, I said instead, forcing a yawn. I've had a long journey. Let's talk after I've rested. Obinna's relief was palpable. Of course, he said, rushing to help me sit down in the living room. Why don't I prepare something for you to eat? I nodded, watching him carefully as he disappeared into the kitchen. Jinika sat down beside me, her eyes studying me as if searching for any sign that I might know too much. Did the trip go well? She asked in sign language, her hands moving smoothly. Yes, everything went perfectly, I signed back, my movements slow and deliberate. I can't wait to tell you all about it. Jinika smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Good. We'll have plenty of time to catch up, she replied, her hands barely missing a beat. I nodded and leaned back, closing my eyes as if in exhaustion. But my mind was racing. They had tried to kill me. They had planned to kill me, and it wasn't over yet. Obinna was in the kitchen now, probably spiking my food with whatever poison they had prepared. I had to be smart about this. I couldn't let on that I knew anything. Not until I had enough evidence to protect myself and ensure they would both pay for what they had done. When Obinna finally returned with a plate of food, I forced myself to sit up and smile. You've always taken such good care of me, I said, accepting the plate. Of course, my love, he said, but his eyes were distant, calculating. I knew he was watching me, waiting for the moment the poison would take effect. I picked up the fork, my hand trembling slightly, and took a small bite. The food tasted normal, but I knew better than to trust it. I chewed slowly, smiling at him as I swallowed. "This is delicious," I said, forcing another bite into my mouth. Obinna watched me closely, his eyes narrowing slightly. Ginika was silent, her hands resting in her lap as she watched the interaction. I could feel her suspicion growing, but I kept my expression relaxed, pretending to be none the wiser. "I'm so glad you like it," Obinna said after a moment, his voice tight. I finished the meal as quickly as I could without raising suspicion, then set the plate down. "I think I'll lie down now," I said, rising to my feet. "It's been such a long day." "Of course," Obinna said, his voice full of false concern. "Get some rest, my love. I'll check on you later." I nodded and made my way to the bedroom, feeling their eyes on my back the entire way. Once inside, I closed the door and leaned against it, my breath coming in shallow gasps. My mind was racing, trying to figure out my next move. I needed proof. Something solid that would expose them both and ensure they couldn't harm me any further. But how could I get it without tipping them off? For the next few days, I played the role of the clueless wife perfectly. I smiled, laughed, and acted as if everything was normal, even as I kept my ears open for any slip-ups, any indication that they were planning something new. Every night, I pretended to take the food Obinna prepared for me, but I secretly disposed of it when he wasn't looking. I couldn't risk eating anything he made, not when I knew what he was capable of. Ginika visited often, her fake concern almost as sickening as Obinna's. She signed to me with exaggerated kindness, but I could see the hatred in her eyes. She was waiting for me to die, for the poison to take effect. But I refused to give them the satisfaction. As the days passed, I began to notice something strange. Obinna was becoming more and more agitated, his temper flaring over the smallest things. Ginika, too, seemed more on edge, her smiles forced and her hands trembling slightly when she signed to me. They were growing desperate. The poison hadn't worked, and they didn't understand why. I could see the fear in their eyes, the fear that I would find out the truth before they could finish the job. I knew I had to act quickly. I couldn't keep up the charade forever. I needed something concrete, something that would ensure they were both punished for what they had done. One night, as Obinna slept beside me, I slipped out of bed and crept into the living room. I had noticed that he kept his phone locked away in a drawer, and I was certain there would be something on it that I could use. I found the phone easily, my hands trembling as I unlocked it. I scrolled through his messages, my heart pounding as I saw the countless exchanges between him and Ginika. They had been plotting my death for months, their words dripping with venom and greed. But it wasn't just the messages that I found. There were voice recordings, too. Recordings of them discussing their plans, laughing at the thought of my demise, and talking about the wealth they would inherit once I was gone. I transferred everything to my own phone, careful not to leave any trace of what I had done. When I was finished, I locked the phone back in the drawer and returned to bed, my heart racing. The next morning, I called a lawyer. I didn't tell Obinna where I was going, just that I needed to run some errands. He didn't question me, too preoccupied with his own worries to notice that something had changed. The lawyer listened to everything I had to say, his face growing grimmer with each passing minute. When I played the recordings, his expression turned to one of shock and disgust. "You need to go to the police," he said, his voice firm. "This is more than enough evidence to put them both behind bars." Please like, share and subscribe for part 2.